I want to expand on that because the emphasis is that this offering paid leave is a smart decision, a business decision. It reduces employee turnover and increases employee retention. I think it can change the culture of a company, as is laid out. Now, I introduced legislation that would provide this much needed protective leave to workers following every parent's worst nightmare, the death of the child. My colleague, Mrs. Wild, had introduced that. The Sarah Grace Farley Kluger Act is named after the brave families who lost children and have been tireless advocates for this cause, and their experience illustrates how critically important it is for parents to have protected leave after losing a child. Barry Kluger, who lost his daughter Erica in 2001, says in his testimony submitted for the record, new parents are given 12 weeks of unpaid leave under FMLA, but most employers only give their workers 3 or 5 days, up to 5 days, to grieve. Imagine receiving the most earth-shattering news, having to bury your child, and then returning to work only a few days later. And that's for those lucky enough to work for employers who provide even that minimal leave. According to the National Academy of Sciences, the death of a child is one of the greatest and often most enduring stresses a parent can experience. No parent should see their child be lowered into the ground. Kelly Farley's experience speaks to how vitally important this protected time is for grieving families. He and his wife lost both his daughter and their son in the course of 2 years. When his daughter Katie died, he dove right back into his work. He said that, and I quote, "I thought that was expected of me as a dad, but on the inside I was screaming in pain." To this day, Kelly describes the decision to go right back to work as one of the biggest mistakes of his life. 18 months later, Kelly lost his son Noah. This time he and his wife took off 3 months to start the grieving process. Having time allowed them to begin to heal and to get the support they needed. Kelly says it literally saved the couple from a complete emotional breakdown. Kelly and his wife were fortunate enough to have employers who were understanding, but it's not the case for every one of the estimated 20 million parents who have lost a child. By age 60, nearly 10% of parents have experienced the death of a child. Illinois, my state, is one of 2 states that has passed protected work leave for grieving parents. My bill would allow workers nationally to take up to 12 weeks of protected leave. I appreciate our witnesses for highlighting the incredibly important reasons why we need national paid leave. Research shows, and stories like Barry and Kelly's demonstrate how important it is to include bereavement within FMLA. Dr. Jacobs, in your testimony, you also touched on the big impact leave has on the health and well-being of new mothers and fathers. With the few seconds we have left, could you expand on how federal leave laws provide leave circumstances like bereavement, in the case we talked about, how the federal laws don't have that for critical health and well-being of working families?
So I can't speak specifically to the impact of bereavement leave on health outcomes for families. I can say, as the mother of 2 children, the idea of having to go back to work immediately after losing a child is breathtaking, and so I can only imagine. A few things that I can say based on the data. First of all, we know there are demographic differences in terms of child mortality, so minority families are much more likely to experience the loss of a child, so I'll say that there's a demographic dimension to this as well. And the second thing I'll say is that we know that the opioid crisis has expanded the range of the kinds of families who are losing children. This isn't just about young children, it's also about parents losing older adult children. And so I think when we think about bereavement and who this impacts and the ripple effects it's having on the labor market, that it's important to actually take a step back and think bigger, and I'm very happy to have mentioned that.
Steal 2 more seconds. I spoke to a constituent yesterday about other issues, but she shared that she's raising her 9-year-old grandson because her 28-year-old son died of opioid overdose, and the child's mother died a year after that. So this is something we're seeing across the country, and it does not discriminate. Thank you. I yield back.